This is Right On Radio, the voice of the real resistance in occupied Europe.
Welcome to Right On Radio. My name is Daniel Friberg. I'm the editor of RightOn.net and CEO of Arctus. I will be your host tonight, as usual, together with my co-host, friend and colleague John Morgan, who is Arctus editor-in-chief as well as co-editor at RightOn.net. Glad to have you here, John.
Thanks, Daniel. Good to be here.
Excellent. And joining us tonight as well, we have a Swedish journalist and political analyst and Baron, Jonas de Geer. Welcome, Jonas.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. The topic of today's program is the migrant crisis, or as I prefer to call it, migrant invasion. And to discuss this topic, joining us today is Mariann Őry, head of the foreign desk at the Hungarian conservative daily newspaper Magyar Hírlap. I hope that I got that pronunciation right. Mariann is specialized in migration, European affairs, and right-wing parties. It's a great honor to have you here, Mariann.
Thank you.
So, to get this conversation started, I thought it would be very interesting for both ourselves as well as our listeners to kind of get the Hungarian take on this migrant invasion going on, including the general sentiment in Hungary among the politicians as well as the general public, and also tell us more about this really awesome border fence that you built. Mariann, over to you.
Okay. Well, in Hungary, the sentiment towards migration has changed a lot during last year, because last year, this time, all the opposition parties, the left-wing opposition parties, said that this is not a real problem and Hungary won't be affected by migration. And we used to have a lot more people back then and also last summer who were very positive about migration, who had this refugees welcome notion. But I think that this has changed a lot now. And now that the Hungarian government has built a fence over the Serbian border and the Croatian border last autumn, I think that practically there is no one in Hungary who is explicitly against this border, or at least they're not saying it because the majority of the people clearly support it.
Yeah, wasn't there even some sort of national poll that the government sent out before, which was, I think it was a pretty awesome poll. The questions were kind of somewhat leading, perhaps, I guess, but also very true, very truthful. For example, I remember one of the questions being something along the lines, please correct me if I'm wrong here, would you prefer to solve the demographical the demographical problem of Hungary by supporting families having more children in Hungary, or by allowing migration, which is a perfectly valid question, I think, but it's also a question that no other government in Europe has kind of asked the populace so far.
Yeah, this is true. This questionnaire was very important for the government because now they can say that they are really representing the will of the people. I've also heard this criticism about the questions being a bit leading because obviously if someone is asked that, do you want to support migrants or do you want to support Hungarian families? I doubt that anyone would say that, no, I don't want to support Hungarian families, I would go for the migrant, obviously. But still, at least the government has asked the people about it. And this way, Prime Minister Orbán has all the right to criticize Western leaders when he says that the gap between them and their voters has grown really great. And we can clearly see it if you see any polls in Germany regarding German migration policies or Angela Merkel's opinion on migration in general, or if we just read any article in mainstream Western press and then we also read the comment section, it's very, very clear that the people are not supporting these pro-migration policies.
Yeah, and I would probably dare to say that the Hungarian government, when it comes to the migration issue, is probably one of few governments in Europe that actually listens to the people and is closest to the popular opinion on immigration in our entire continent.
Well, this is the problem. There is a discrepancy between the political and journalistic, if you will, or not journalistic, but what do you say, mediatic elites and the rest of the population in most other countries. That doesn't seem to be anymore the case in Hungary, which makes it very interesting.
And something that I find even more interesting is all of these excellent speeches on the subject that Orbán has given during the last year, where he explicitly states that we have to defend the Hungarian ethnicity, otherwise our grandchildren will not look like us, which is it's pretty unusual for a European leader or a statesman to say such a thing in these horrible, dark times that we live in.
And he goes beyond that. He also has, in some speeches, talked about Hungary defending the European and the Christian tradition as well, which I don't think too many Western European leaders would appeal to that in a public address.
Exactly. So, Mariann, what's your take on this? And can you also give us maybe some more good examples of the all of these nice things from his speeches?
Yes, you're right about the speeches actually. And it's no wonder why his speeches are now being very popular, I think, also on the internet, because they are being subtitled either by the government itself or by nice Hungarian YouTube users. Orbán is saying quite openly, and this is very unusual in Europe, especially in Western Europe, that we do not want to live together with a larger group of people who come from a different culture. We just don't want to do that, and no one can force us to do that. He's very clear about it. And also him and other members of the government have pointed out that it's not really only about religion when we are speaking about Christianity and Christian Europe, because Europe in general, even those people who are not religious, are culturally Christians, and this is very important. So this is something that we can't hear from Western leaders, and Orbán is very, very outspoken in these issues, that we don't want here many people from different cultures, because we do not believe that this multicultural experiment done by Western countries was a success. And nearly every day we can see new examples that why he's right and why definitely the multicultural experiment is not really working well.
That's why it's such a disaster that the current Pope Francis the first makes statements that, like that he did the other day, about migrants, and it's not the first time, but that everyone's been a migrant, and that kind of left-wing rhetoric coming from the Vatican.
Yeah, it's a shame and a huge disgrace. I mean,
it is, and it really undermines those sort of leaders who try to sort of represent represent the Christian tradition.
Well, Mariann, I think, would probably know more about this than I, but I believe there was a Hungarian bishop last summer when the Pope came out in favor of the migrants being led into Europe. He actually came out publicly and said, "I'm sorry, Pontiff, but you're wrong," and actually gave a public address against, which I just thought that was amazing. Again, that's not something you would see in the U.S. or Western Europe, I don't think.
But we will probably see more of that in the future, I hope. And I think more people should call him out on this, because he's obviously wrong and he's probably corrupt as well. Sorry, Jonas, for insulting your Pope.
No. And I don't mind in the slightest. I can't stand him, but anyhow.
Mariann, which bishop was that? Do you remember?
I can't exactly remember, unfortunately, but there were several members of the church who were speaking about migration in an absolutely different tone than the Pope, or were openly criticizing him. But unfortunately, can't remember who exactly was that.
But I'll just emphasize for our listeners too, since we were here during the peak of the migrant crisis, well, at least the peak of the migrant crisis in Hungary. We were all in Budapest last summer, so we got to see it firsthand. And you really can't even imagine what the contrast was between the situation at the end of August and the beginning of September, and only a few weeks later. I mean, they just managed to cut it off completely. So when some people have said to me, that, well, even if we wanted to stop immigration completely, we couldn't do it. I mean, Orban has proven them wrong. I mean, he stopped it entirely in just a matter of weeks. It just takes the will to make it happen.
Yes, and that is also why I'm 100% certain that Orban and Hungary is kind of spearheading this paradigm shift when it comes to the attitudes towards migration in Europe. And we've already seen proof of this by seeing other leaders, especially from the, how do you pronounce it, Visegrad countries. I mean, Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, and Hungary. And also, I mean, Latvia has a pretty right-wing government that agrees with this. So I think that Orban, he has really risen in popularity all throughout Europe as being kind of the primary defender of European civilization in these dark times and crucial times for European civilization, which is quite amazing considering Hungary is, in terms of population, a small country, but Orban as a statesman has still proven himself to be one of the most important leaders and statesmen in Europe of today.
Yes.
Well, absolutely.
Yes. Sorry.
No,
but Orban did also get some support from some of the other political parties, didn't he, for his action against the migrants?
Yes, it's true. Opposition party Jobbik, which is now, I think, maybe the second biggest opposition party, or no, maybe the biggest or the second biggest. It's hard to say because different polls show different results. But obviously, as a right-wing party, they are also against migration, and they are supporting his policies regarding that. The left-wing opposition parties, they were in a more difficult situation because I can remember socialist politicians saying last summer or maybe already in last spring that migration is not a real problem. It's just something that Fidesz is creating to gain a popularity and to scare the people. So a few months later, they were in a very awkward position because no one was really pro-migration in Hungary anyway, except for some liberals. So the socialists found themselves in a very difficult situation where their party friends in Western Europe wanted them to push for a pro-migration agenda, whereas their voters were against migration. So they also turned against migration in a mild, opportunistic way.
Interesting. Another aspect of this that I remember them discussing last summer was didn't Orban present some evidence that NGOs associated with George Soros had actually given aid to some of the migrants to come to Europe, which is something else that I haven't heard spoken of at all in the American media.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, personally, Orban couldn't really give evidences about them helping to go to Europe, but I think, and it was very unusual even for Hungary and for Europe, that regarding the migrant crisis, Orban has been speaking about Soros's role in NGOs in a very, very open way, which he didn't really do earlier, and it's not too common in Europe. I think it's maybe only such a big topic in Macedonia, where opposition paid by Soros is trying to make a Maidan with no success, really. What is clear and what can be proven also in Hungary, that those NGOs and those newly formed Facebook groups who started helping migrants in Budapest and the Keleti railway station or near the border, they got help from Soros's foundation, but their work was mostly humanitarian. And they, for their humanitarian work, weren't criticized by the government. For what they got criticism is that they got into politics and they were organizing protests, which was quite, I would say, a weird thing from a sane point of view, because their help was factually needed at the train stations and other places, but they were busy protesting, and there were many people who openly admitted to journalists that I went to the train station to help the migrants because I so much hate this government. So the connection with politics and so-called charity organizations was quite clear. That this is why the government was more in favor with the official charity organizations, those connected to the church and these kind of things. And also the government got many criticisms from liberals and also from foreign politicians that they are not doing their job because they are not helping the migrants, and that there are very bad conditions at the train station. And the government's position was very clear about it from the beginning. They said that in Hungary we have all the infrastructure to help the migrants. We have centers for them where they can get medical help, they can get food, they can get everything that they need. But a train station is not such a migrant center, so they are not supposed to be there, and it would be quite absurd if the government would make the facilities for them at a place where they do not have the right to stay, because they were staying at the train station not because there were no other place to go. They were there because they wanted to catch trains going to Austria.
Yes.
Has there been a discussion in Hungary about who's organizing this? Because it's not a mass migration. You can call it the mass invasion, if you will. I do it very, very often. But the thing is, there's got to be kind of nation behind, because they're coming in such numbers all of a sudden. And when they reach Europe, they're normally sort of well clad, well fed. I mean, these are not people fleeing from for their lives, and so there's got to be a bigger organization behind it, and it's not been discussed in any Western media that I've seen.
Well, in Hungary, it is being discussed. What is clear and what is known to Hungarians and other people too is that there is an extremely big and very well organized system of human traffickers and another kind of criminals who are helping the migrants. But regarding the root cause of the problem, that why there are so many people coming, who is helping them coming from home and these things. About that in the Hungarian discourse, there are some conspiracy theories, obviously, and there are some more legitimate questions also.
Is there any investigative journalism being done on it in Hungary? I'm just asking out of curiosity, given that the climate is so different from.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. If any journalist has been going in extensive investigation regarding that, so there are mostly theories also coming from security policy experts, because many people have this feeling that this is just happening pretty strange, as Africa has been poor, always. Crisis in the Middle East, this is also not new. War in Syria is going on for 4 or 5 years. So, and still at the end of 2014, all the migrants who have been coming to Hungary were those coming from Kosovo and other parts of the Balkans. And then at the beginning of last year, masses of people started to come from the Middle East and from Africa. So
well, that's my point exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe most analysts are kind of in agreement that at least Turkey plays a major part in this. I mean, they've even tried to blackmail the EU. If you don't give us more money, we'll just keep the migrants flowing into Europe.
Yeah, well, they let them in, but I don't think that you have sort of agents from the Turkish state.
Well, I actually
telling people where they're from. Yeah.
I actually believe so. I'm certainly no supporter of Erdogan. I know this is probably a bit controversial statement in Hungary because we have some well, at least one party that it's somewhat favorable towards him. But we have to realize that Erdogan is an enemy of European civilization, and he's. I mean, the Ottomans and the Turks have always been the enemies of Europe. I mean, they even occupied most of Hungary during a long time period and so forth. And I truly believe that his government and other people within Turkey are in fact encouraging this flow, this massive flow of migrants just happening now.
we also know that Turkey's been giving aid to ISIS, and I believe the Hungarian government has presented evidence showing that the ringleader of the attack in Paris in November was at Keleti Station for a few days in September. I think they were able to prove this by following a car he had rented in Paris. And I think they even said he allegedly left with a few people from the station. Is that right, Mariann?
Yes, I think yes. I'm sure that he was here. I'm not entirely sure about this information, whether he took some people, but this is very likely. Yes.
So yeah, we know that Turkey is involved with that. Well, of course, so is NATO. So the tendrils of this thing branch out quite far and wide.
Yeah, and I also find it very, very interesting that no other of these immensely wealthy countries in the Middle East are taking in any so-called refugees whatsoever. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a really wealthy nation, and they have lots of capacity to take in at least 1 million refugees if they wanted to, but they are kind of taking in 0. And there is definitely from the Middle Eastern coalition what I prefer to call the axis of evil. I mean, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the U.S. Sorry, John, for insulting your.
Well, I fully agree with you. So.
But and kind of promoting this to weaken Europe, because Europe is the prime competitor of the U.S. and there are strong forces within the U.S. globalist elite that wants to weaken Europe, which and the best way of doing that is by encouraging these flows of migrants or invaders, actually, because we're not talking about women and children here. We're talking about 80% of these people are young men of fighting age. It's basically soldiers. Many of them are probably from ISIS or sympathizers, at least radical Islamists, and it's not a regular kind of demographic of real refugees. I mean, if it was real refugees, for example, if it was war in Sweden, I think we would probably try to get women and children out first, and the men would stay and fight and try to solve the situation. But in this case, it's the total opposite. I mean, we have young men of fighting age being the majority of migrants. What's your take on that, Mariann?
Yes, this is true, and it was also seen in Hungary too, when we are seeing these so-called migrant marches, when the migrants just got tired of waiting at the train station and they wanted to go to Austria by walking. We also saw that the majority are young men, and there are theories about it, obviously, among the migrant-friendly groups that, this is because the road is unsafe, so the young men have to go, and then when they are there and when they can get an asylum status, then they can bring the family. But it gets us back to the root problem that if they are fleeing directly from a war-torn area, then this sounds completely insane to leave your wife and your children in war-torn Syria or in the middle of Aleppo. And if they are leaving them in Turkey, for example, in a refugee camp, which is in most cases this is what is happening, then it gets back us to the question that whether they are real refugees or whether they are economic migrants. as our government says, because maybe in international law it's not the case, but I think that basic logic and sanity says that someone is a refugee when they are fleeing a dangerous war-torn area into the first safe place, and Turkey is actually safe. It's not good being there, but obviously it is safe. Not to mention Greece, Macedonia, Serbia, Hungary, and the countries of the Balkans. So people in the right-wing politics in Hungary, and the government also says that everyone who has reached Hungary's border is not a refugee anymore, but an economic migrant because they passed loads of safe countries.
That's a very, very important point, and a point that I've made for quite a while now. That you don't. You see, the Swedish Prime Minister of Sweden said in a debate, for example, a little while ago, that these are people fleeing for their lives. You don't flee for your life from Afghanistan or Syria to Sweden. It's just not possible. I mean, you flee to the nearest shelter you can get if you truly are a refugee. So I'm very that is clear for many Hungarians.
Especially,
because,
yeah,
go on.
Yeah, especially since most of them are ending up, their final destination is Germany and Sweden, which provides the most benefits financially for these invaders, which kind of says it all. It's very obvious that we are talking about economic migrants in the nicest, if you want to put it in the nicest possible sense. I view them as pure invaders and hostile to everything that Europe stands for, and a huge threat to European civilization. But anyways, it's been a really good discussion so far, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this after a short music break. And since we're kind of on this Hungarian topic, I think the most suitable song for this music break would be Carpathia, and I will try to pronounce this correctly. Egy az Isten, egy a nemzet, which means one God, one nation. How did I do, Marianna?
Great.
It was pretty accurate. Yeah. Okay. We go to break and talk to you soon, everyone.
Egy az Isten, egy a nemzet. Bármi gyenge, bármi sebzett. Ahol a fák égig nőnek, állnak még a határkövek. Szent koronán, úgy vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Szent koronán, úgy vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Zúgó erdők, kéklő sziklák, eső verte árva kopják. Vízhangozzák, mennydörögnek. Egy az Isten, egy a nemzet. Szent koronán, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Szent koronánk, ó, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk.
Elvérzett a nemzet Nagy Magyarországért. Most sír, zokog a lelkünk hegyekért, rólákért. Aki azt majd egyszer újra feltámasztja, áldja meg az Isten és minden magyar ajkot. Most hát okulásul figyelj a szavakra, figyelj, s kezed merítsd a hűs patakba. Érezd a pataknak sebes rohanását, az ország szívének minden dobbanását. Hallgasd a köveket, hallgasd, amint mondják, idegen hatalmak őket összezúzták. Kőnek és embernek ugyanaz volt sorsa, mostoha gyermekét egy világ taposta.
Szent koronánk, ó, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Szent koronánk, ó, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Szent koronánk, ó, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk. Szent koronánk, ó, vigyázz hazánk, hajnal csillag szép keresztünk, ragyog fel reánk.
And there we are back from the break, and I hope that all of you enjoyed this beautiful song by one of Hungary's more or most famous kind of nationalist musical groups. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Mariann, but didn't they even receive some sort of like cultural stipend or prize from the government like a couple of years ago?
No, that was actually misunderstanding, I think, or it was not entirely clear, because the Ministry of Culture didn't actually wanted to give them a prize, and it was not clear whether it was the initiative someone on a lower level or it was just a misunderstanding and they wanted to award another Carpathia, because there is another folk band called Carpathia. I don't remember now what was the end of this thing, but there was quite a scandal about it.
Yeah, and I think that was quite entertaining, because I think they actually ended up with a prize, but it was like a misunderstanding, as you say. They wanted to reward this other Carpathia, which I actually never heard about, because this Carpathia that we just listened to it's well, for me it's pretty awesome. It's good nationalist music. It's like the Hungarian equivalent of Ultima Thule, which is a very famous Swedish kind of nationalist group. And if I'm not entirely mistaken, I think they ended up being able to actually keep the prize, but they got it by well, through a misunderstanding, simply.
I think so too.
But still pretty awesome.
If I may, Daniel, I would like to go back to something you said before the music, and that's about the powers, the globalist powers that are undermining Europe. I don't think traditionally that the United States as such have found Europe to be an arch enemy. I think it's the other way around. They know it's the home continent, if you will. But the big question here is, and I'm not least sort of asking you, Mariann, is it not sort of too late? Has it not gone too far for much of Europe to think in these geopolitical terms that we tend to think of? I don't think it's too late for Hungary. I don't think it's too late for Poland. But sometimes I wonder whether they managed to more or less turn our countries into territories rather than nations. So what's your take on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. Where from a geopolitical point of view, it's quite difficult here in Central Eastern Europe. And this is one of the questions which a bit undermines the unity of the Visegrad countries. We are cooperating brilliantly, and there is no problem with that, and we understand the differences. But it is true that Poland has a different attitude towards Russia, as other countries have in the Visegrad 4. Their attitude is more closer to the Baltic states and also to Romania, who urge a more a greater and permanent presence of the NATO in the region. And this is something that Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic doesn't want. We don't.
Why is that? Do you think? I mean, I find that a bit puzzling, to be honest. I know it's the case, but why is that? I mean, you would have had very bad experiences from Russian Soviet invasion and occupation as well.
Yes. Well. The attitude of the Hungarian government in this is rather pragmatic, I think, and we understand, and also I think the majority of the Hungarians understand that, even though in some people there are some deep-rooted anti-Russian sentiment, though far not as in Poland or in the Baltic countries, that we understand that we have to have a good and pragmatic relationship with Russia. If these relations would be destroyed, as PM Orbán has just said a few days ago, then it would destroy the Hungarian economy and the Hungarian industry. So this is clear that we are dependent on Russia, whether it is good or not. And the Hungarian government manages to maintain a pragmatic relationship with Russia, but this is, I think, not the case with Poland. And it's hard to say from here whether they actually mean what they say, the Polish leaders and the Baltic leaders. But we here in Hungary sometimes have the impression, and though we can understand it, but still we have the impression that their logic and pragmatism is a bit, overshadowed by their anti-Russian sentiment. And when Baltic leaders say that they are actually afraid that Russia will invade them, then so I'm pretty sure that this is not a realistic scenario, and it's very hard to say that whether they actually fear that Russian troops will go to Latvia or to Lithuania, or they're just saying it to have some more NATO support or for whatever reasons.
Could it be that they have a much longer history than the Hungarians, even though the Hungarians have had horrible experiences with communism under Bela Kun and 56 and all the rest of it, but these countries that you mentioned, they've been under Russian rule for hundreds of years, and especially the Baltic states have hardly never experienced, or hardly ever, I should say, experienced sovereignty. It's not. They're not used to it.
Well, they've also been under Swedish rule. But that
was a while ago, though.
Which I think was great, by the way. But yeah, please go on.
No. It's just a thought. It might be because it's puzzling to I think most Western Europeans why there is this difference between, say,
Hungary and Poland. Basically.
Yeah, Hungary and Poland.
But there are also lots of Polish kind of right wingers or nationalists that are quite in favor of Russia. It's they're quite divided on this issue, even though I truly believe that the vast majority is very anti-Russian.
There's no doubt about that.
Very anti-Russian, also very anti-Germanic, well, I think the Polish. Poland is a country I really like, by the way. I love their conservative culture and so forth. But I think they need to learn to kind of let go of the past and kind of wake up to the current threats facing Europe and kind of get
and
with it.
Stop over idealizing the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I completely agree, but I can understand why that has sort of become the case if you've been in their shoes for such a long time.
Yeah.
And when the US was the only ally, really, or the only hope they could see. Yeah.
And I also think a major explanation of this kind of anti-Russian, anti-Germanic sentiment in that's prevalent in Poland is because they don't have any migrant problem whatsoever. I mean, pretty much all of the Western European countries, have this really huge migrant crisis threatening our whole existence, which kind of makes it natural for us to let go of past differences and past conflicts and kind of focus on the imminent threat. And I think that is one of the big explanations why the Polish people have not really adapted to this new situation, because they haven't experienced the same problems as we have.
No, true.
Yes, true, because Poland is not a country where migrants want to settle, and they're not even a transit country. So they have a rather tough stance on migration, but they don't really have and haven't really even seen real migrants, I think. So their immigrants are mostly Ukrainians.
Mm. Yeah,
it's different.
The good kind of migrants, I suppose, and the same goes for the Baltic states. So I think that's the main explanation, basically.
Mm.
What do you think, Mariann?
Yeah, well, what you say, it definitely makes sense, and well, we can understand their opinion on Russia based on their historical experiences, and well, Hungary is not even trying to mess on it, and we don't want to get into arguments with Poland about this. So we are when we are cooperating now we are searching for what is common, so on what we are agreeing and to solve problems, and not going on the same issues on which we will not find a common opinion in the end. But what is disturbing, though, and but the Hungarian government is not talking about it that outspokenly for understandable reasons is that it's okay if Poland is afraid of Russia, but if they are bringing NATO troops here, this is not something that we really want.
Okay, so but given that Hungary has taken a tough stance on immigration and been very criticized by various representatives of the international community, so-called, for that, and so has Poland. Do you not see, it's a leading question, I know, but do you not see Poland as sort of a natural ally, being still sort of Central Europe and or Central European?
Yeah, well, and we are natural allies with Poland, and we have this 1,000-year friendship, and also the sayings that Poles and Hungarians are two good friends, that we are brothers, and so this friendship and solidarity between Poland and Hungary is very apparent, and the government has also said many times when Poland started to be attacked by the European Commission and by Western politicians that we will never support any sanctions or any punishment against Poland, and we will always stand by Poland. And they also said the same to Hungary.
John, do you have anything to add?
No. I mean, I think that this last couple of years, Hungary has really illustrated the dilemma that Europe faces right now. I mean, traditionally, during the Cold War and during the first year after the Cold War, we just saw the relentless expansion of NATO and American interests into Europe, and it seems like Hungary has really taken the lead in opposition to that, both in Fidesz and in Jobbik, which I know is an opposition party. And I mean, we've seen the consequences of that. I mean, there was an attempt in late 2014 to unseat Orban through, I mean, some people here were calling it the Hungarian Maidan. It didn't, it fizzled after only a couple of weeks. But, the American ambassador, I believe, Andre Goodfriend, was out at the time, actually encouraging the protesters, making it clear that, the U.S. was at least sympathetic, if not actually backing these people. So they definitely, they're disturbed by Orban, because I think they see Hungary is the direction that Central and Eastern Europe, and, who knows, maybe even eventually Western Europe could take, when people realize that, it's really not to their benefit to keep doing America's bidding and NATO's bidding in these matters. And
I'm 100% sure that this is the beginning of that, and that Western Europe will follow soon enough. One of the statements that I remember from this futile attempt at creating a Hungarian Maidan is like, is when I don't remember who said it, if it was Orban himself or some other government representative, who simply made a statement that, well, Hungary is not Ukraine. You have no chance of accomplishing something similar here, which kind of was obvious after this really pathetic attempt at the start against these.
I saw them. It was just a few hundred people waving flags. It was obviously not any kind of popular protest. And didn't Orban call a counter-protest that drew a huge number of people around that time?
Yeah. Yes. Well, we have this pro-government protest, which is called Békemenet Peace March. I'm not entirely sure whether they called for one during that period, but quite probably. I think that the biggest anti-government protest, which was theoretically not an anti-government protest, was about this plan to put a tax on on internet usage, which was an idea that was originally not so radical as it came out. So there were some communication problem there, and what they really wanted is to put some tax on the providers and not on the users. But when this all came out, it was quite absurd, obviously, and the opposition parties and many NGOs who were calling themselves civils, but they were actually political forces. They have organized pretty big protests, actually, and there were many people, as they say, who were never ever protesting in their life, but then they went onto the streets because of this internet tax thing, and it very soon turned out to be an anti-government protest, and they were shouting things like down with Orban, or when they were marching and they passed the Russian embassy, they were shouting Russians go home, which people used to shout around the system change. And it was a bit weird, to find a connection between Putin and the internet tax, but well, they found it. And the American charged the affairs, not the ambassador, because we didn't have an ambassador then. Andre Goodfriend, he joined these protests, and he said that he was there as a private observer. And well,
it had nothing to do with
no one really believed that, So I mean, he's an American diplomat going on an anti-government protest. He wasn't shouting, and he was alone and everything, but though somehow the opposition press did make a picture of him. So it just sad also to me, because I made several interviews with him. He said that, well, he just wanted to see it with his own eyes, and he didn't regard it as a symbolic move, which was, well, I don't want to offend him because he's a general nice person, but this is obviously not true. I mean, he was a very well experienced, very professional career diplomat. Also, is a minister in Syria, so he was exactly knowing what he was doing.
Well, it was also right around that time that John McCain, on the floor of the U.S. Senate, condemned Orban as a neo-fascist dictator, as I recall, and accused him of getting into bed with Putin or something like that.
Yeah, it was. I don't remember his exact words, but he was very, very rude. And,
but he did say neo-fascist dictator. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, it was.
Which is kind of the nicest compliment you can get from a corrupt person like him.
Yeah. Well, it had some interesting reactions in Hungary, actually, because the reason behind it was, according to experts, is that he got his information from the State Department, and there are many people in the State Department who are lobbying against Hungary and who have an anti-Hungarian stance. So this is where his information came from. But the reaction in Hungary was interesting, because for some reason, and I don't think that this is an entirely true evaluation, but the Hungarian right side always thought that the Republicans in the US are an ally to them, but well, it's not a completely true evaluation.
No.
I think.
Definitely not.
Also,
what's behind that misconception, do you think, John?
Well, I guess they just see themselves as conservatives, and they know that the Republicans are supposedly the conservative party of the U.S. So I guess it's natural. And if you only look at the surface of the Republicans, their rhetoric, I mean, you could almost believe it. But if you look at what they actually do and what they stand for these days, I mean, obviously it's very different from any type of genuine conservatism. This word "conservative" has become quite popular in the on the alternative right lately, and that's much more correct for most of them.
Yeah, especially since the previous Republican administrations have kind of supported left-wing politics in Europe and migration and so forth. That's probably not a natural stance for a true conservative party, I would say.
Well, even in their actions in the U.S., I mean, they've been gradually liberalizing, over the past few decades. I mean, there's very little difference between their program now and the Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You even used to have sort of proper conservative Democrats still as late as the early mid-90s. I guess that's when that breed died out, but it's
it started transitioning before that, but yeah, it's that's why now when you
they were around until the early 90s at least.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. I mean, Americans are often very hesitant to change their Congress people, their senators. It's actually kind of a problem in U.S. politics. But if you look at the map today, basically the Democrats only hold the east and west coasts, and the entire rest of the country votes Republican. So they managed to link up, basically all the rural parts of the U.S., the South and the Midwest, and the far West. That's basically like a single voting bloc now.
But luckily we're moving towards some big changes in the political landscape.
Very possibly. It certainly looks like it.
And Mariann, as a Hungarian political journalist and analyst, and with a kind of foreign policy perspective, what's your take on the American presidential race? Which is your favorite candidate, if I may ask?
Oh, should I answer this question?
He has to ask this of everyone, so.
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite question. If you have to choose between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, who would you choose?
Well, it's probably going to be Clinton.
No, I would definitely not choose Clinton. And those who are familiar with my articles know that I especially don't like Hillary Clinton, and I love digging up her dirt. So if I had to choose, then let's put it this way, because I'm not an American voter. From a journalist point of view, Trump is definitely the most interesting candidate. So there's really nothing you're writing about Cruz or Rubio or not to mention the others. Who cares about them? I'm a bit actually sorry that Jeb Bush left the race, because it was really, really funny during the debates when he was bullied by Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was, I totally agree. That was the most entertaining parts of all the debates, which I actually watched, by the way.
But I'm a bit intrigued there. What dirt have you dug up on Hillary? I mean, I agree completely that she's a repulsive woman. There's no doubt about it. But I just got curious.
Yeah, well, I have written a lot about the Clinton Foundation, which is most probably a rather corrupt organization, and it was much debated, I think, in the American press too, the relation of the Clinton Foundation and the State Department when Hillary was the Secretary of State, and there were these issues that when some obviously non-democratic country wanted to buy weapons from the United States, then Hillary's foundation was lobbying in the State Department for them, after getting obviously loads of money from countries like Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries.
Do you believe in the sort of the information that she would be a predatory lesbian that has that's circulated?
Oh.
I believe
you can't say perhaps. Yeah, well,
I believe it's 100% true.
I can't really comment on this.
Perfectly understandable. Anyways, Mariann, you've been a frequent guest on Russia Today. I mean, you seem like their favorite political commentator when it comes to migration issues from a Hungarian perspective, which I think is nice. I think you've done an excellent job in those appearances. And what's your take on Russia Today as a media project? Do you view them as a positive force? I mean, this is obviously a leading question because I think everyone knows what I think about this.
Yes, well, I think that Russia Today is very important that they are there and they are providing plurality in the media scene in Western countries, and they have grown quite big actually also in the United States, and I think that this is really good because people hear another opinion too, and they are very, very professional. And of course, I know I am aware of the criticism against them, but well, I think that all the media outlets can be criticized for several reasons, and I think that it would be very, very naive to presume that Russia Today is some kind of Putin propaganda organ, whereas all the Western TV stations are free and honest and no one is influencing them. So this is obviously not true. So I think that it's really good that Russia Today is there, available, and I think that they're doing a very, very professional job.
And I would agree. I mean, I think they provide a very, very well-needed counterbalance to the horrible, corrupt, liberal media of the West, who are like blatantly lying about pretty much everything that matters, especially the migrant situation. The Swedish media is, of course, the worst, but I mean, even the Anglo-Saxon media, with Breitbart as the exception, I guess, because I really like them. I truly agree with you that Russia Today is a much needed actor on the international media stage, and they provide a much needed perspective, a different perspective that's not 100% cultural Marxist, not 100% politically correct. Quite the opposite. They're kind of criticizing political correctness and so forth.
The problem is that it's very often, or most of the time, predictable and biased, though. So I mean, I'm not saying that it's just a propaganda outlet, and I think it's changed for the worse. To be honest, I think it used to be better a couple of years ago.
Actually, I would not agree there, and I mean, pretty much all media are biased. It's
I mean that goes with territory. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's naive to kind of believe that there is such a thing as a 100% truly objective, unbiased media. Maybe Magyar Hírlap. But they're probably the exception.
But I agree with Mariann that it's very good that they're around. But it's kind of sad in a way because there is this sort of tendency to have sort of a Cold War going on in the media. It's gone back to that kind of mentality. I can see those tendencies to.
But it's needed. I mean, we need a total media war where actors like Russia Today and most of the Hungarian media, I would say, and most of the Eastern European media, kind of runs over this totally dishonest and evil liberal media of the West, who have done so much harm to our civilization for the past decades. Wouldn't you agree with that, Jonas?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's just.
Or would you prefer Fox News, perhaps?
No, definitely not.
or maybe Svenska Dagbladet.
No. I think definitely. Russia Today is something I'd watch rather than those other channels you mentioned. Certainly, but no.
You just have to keep in mind the bias of any media outlet when you
True.
to it.
I mean,
goes for anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're not stupid people. We don't just swallow all information without any critical perspective whatsoever, of course. But when it comes to the big players on the international media stage, I would say that Russia Today is one of the positive forces. Sure.
So is Iran's press TV, I would say.
Yeah, that's very good.
By the way, it's blocked. It's forbidden to see where I live in the United Kingdom since many years.
Yeah, and I'm in total agreement on that one as well. But anyways, back to Mariann. So you've been a frequent guest on Russia Today, and you're kind of risen to the position of the most kind of internationally famous Hungarian journalist from my perspective. Would you agree with that sentiment, or is that an exaggeration?
Yeah. Well, for the viewers of Russia Today, definitely. Actually, what one thing that just I remember regarding Russia Today, I think it's an important example that they've been doing a very good job regarding the migration crisis in Hungary, because they actually started an all-day live stream from the Hungarian border from Roska, and it was very good and very useful because I think that in their live stream there was the smallest possible chance for misleading people, while there were so many pictures of Hungary that were completely misleading. And it was thanks to one of the movies of Russia Today, and I've also spoken to them about it, and it was really good that they were showing it, that, for example, on CNN and all the main outlets, there were famous picture of a tear-gassed girl on the Serbian border, and she was crying. It was a very dramatic picture, and it was to show the brutality of the Hungarian police, who are, by the way, migrants were throwing stones at them and pieces of concrete, and this was kind of rough situation. And it was a scene on one of the videos from Roska, that this girl, she was dragged by another person, an activist, visibly not a migrant, near to the police, and she was tear gassed, and then she ran away to the journalists. And if they wouldn't make videos there, then we wouldn't know that. So it was really important that they were making this, and this is obviously one special case, but in general I think that we can say that if there are major players who are providing a different perspective, then they are putting pressure on each other, because especially in Western Europe and in the Western world in general, we have the access to more TV stations, we have the access to the internet. So one TV station or one journal can't just blatantly lie about something, because they know that the other one will show the truth, and this works both ways.
And it's certainly no coincidence that if you look at, for example, the famous YouTube clip that I showed during my famous speech in Stockholm in September. Most of these clips showing these hordes of invaders, so-called migrants, storming the European borders, were actually from Russia Today. I mean, it's not a coincidence. I mean, they are one of the few channels who actually show these things. And,
yeah, true. Well, Russia Today, they are everywhere. I mean, one very funny example, when I was in the NATO headquarters during the meeting of the foreign ministers, and we couldn't find the live stream of Stoltenberg's press on the NATO website easily, but we did find the live stream of Russia Today, so we were watching Russia Today in the NATO headquarters.
Must have been interesting.
Yeah.
It is, and it's been a true pleasure to having this discussion with you, Mariann, and it's been a true honor to having you as guest on our show. But all, as you say, as the saying goes, all good things come to an end, and we're nearing the end of this show right now. So before we kind of end it, I would like to give you the opportunity to kind of plug some of the things you're doing. I mean, I know that you have this blog in English, for example, which is very good.
Thank you.
You wrote some nice things about me there, for example. So please let our listeners know the web address and anything, and feel free to mention anything else you want to kind of promote.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity for some self-promotion. Yeah, I do have this blog, which is my name, Őry, O-R-Y, Mariann, wordpress.com. Well, there people can mostly find my opinion pieces and more important interviews translated to English, and there are some actual blog posts too when I was reacting to things like the events in Sweden, or your adventure in the Swedish tabloid press, which are obviously articles that wouldn't really have the proper audience in the Hungarian written press, but I just felt the need to react to those things.
Yeah, and it's a really excellent blog, so I would recommend all of you to visit it. And we will, of course, post a link together with the program when it gets published very soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
And with that, I think we are, yeah, we'll just end it here. And I would like to thank all of you for participating, and all our listeners, of course, for listening to this brand new show and so forth. So thank you, everyone, and have a really good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariann.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me here. It was great.